our first guest is going to be Martin Lokanc. She is a senior mining specialist with the World Bank. I had the privilege of meeting Martin when I was in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, for the Future Metals Summit. Martin gave a talk to many of the leaders of countries on the opening day around critical metals. And I thought it was the best presentation, best information I've seen on critical metals to this point. So I approached Martin afterwards, said, "Would really love to have you on the Global Mining Symposium. Such a great presentation." I'm very happy that he agreed and the World Bank agreed and gave him permission. So he's going to sit down with Namal Karim, our staff writer, right now. Now, Namal, I will introduce Namal, and he can introduce Martin a little bit more thoroughly than I just did. Namal is a staff writer at the Northern Miner. He's our newest member of the team and has been putting out some amazing content for us. I'm sure many of you have been reading the stories that Namal's been writing. He has more than 10 years of experience in journalism, covering crucial issues for major media groups like Thomson Reuters, with reports picked by The Guardian, Al Jazeera, National Post, CBC, and the Globe and Mail. He focuses on stories that connect the global mining industry to climate change and to just transition. He's done a wonderful job for us. Namal, this will be your first Global Mining Symposium. Welcome. You are on mute, so I'll ask you to take off mute and ask you to introduce Martin.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. He said I'll be introducing Martin Lokanc to you. Martin is a senior mining specialist in the World Bank's energy and extractives global practice. He currently supports and leads mining sector development activities across Africa. I believe he's based in Senegal right now. Trained as a mining engineer and economist, he has global experience in mine development, mining strategy, mineral and energy economics, corporate finance, government relations, and economic development. He has over 20 years of experience in the private sector, including working with the World Bank Group. Martin holds a PhD in mineral and energy economics from the Colorado School of Mines in the United States. Good morning, Martin, and welcome. How are you today?
Morning, Namal. Yeah, doing great. Thank you.
I guess it's afternoon there right now.
It is, yeah, it is afternoon.
Okay. So, Martin, I won't take much time. I'll hand over the virtual podium to you for your presentation, I believe, and we'll chat after that.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much. Let me just get that loaded up. And then while I do that, just thank you, Anthony, the Northern Miner Group, for giving me this opportunity to speak on this subject. Okay, let me minimize the window a bit here. Hopefully you're seeing this.
Yep.
Okay.
We
great.
can all see it.
Thanks. So I'm gonna speak for a bit around this topic of critical minerals in lands of opportunity. The first half of the presentation is really going to be on, I think, something that we've been paying a lot of attention to, which is this need for these energy transition minerals if we're going to achieve the sort of objectives around tackling climate change. But the second half is really going to focus on quite a broad region as defined by the Future Minerals Forum, which includes all of Africa, the Middle East, Central and Southern Asia, with a bit maybe perhaps more focus then on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia itself. But before I jump into it, let me just tell you a little bit about the World Bank. I'm not sure if everybody understands the work that we do. Essentially, we have sort of two prongs to our mission. The first is to end extreme poverty, and the second is to promote shared prosperity. So we're one of the largest sort of donors working in this development space globally. And to achieve this mission, we have 5 institutions. Together, they make up the World Bank Group. But the World Bank, as it's commonly known, is actually the first two there at the bottom, the IBRD and IDA. Those principally serve developing country governments, their agencies, SOEs in some cases. The next two, I would say, have a bit more of a focus on the private sector. And I think that they're really critical to minimizing investment risk and really catalyzing that private sector investment in these countries, which is so important for development. The IFC is really almost like a private equity or investment bank. It's probably a better definition, like version of the World Bank. So they'll take small equity positions or kind of debt positions in companies looking to invest in developing countries. Whereas MIGA is really a guarantee agency. And the two of them are quite unique in the sense because a lot of companies, they don't necessarily need the financing from the World Bank, but they're looking to minimize risk. And what happens is that by participating with these two agencies or institutions, you kind of leverage the whole World Bank group and its dialogue with that government. And then should things turn south, really you have sort of recourse that's not in the local courts because the World Bank group and its agencies are protected by certain treaties. And then that gives you access to the last one, which is ICSID, International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. Okay. Let me just move on then into the subject matter and start saying by a little bit of background. I think many people know this already, but the future is more mineral intensive than the past. These renewable energy technologies, which we need to adopt to tackle climate change, are far more mineral intensive than fossil fuel technologies. And this is some of the work that the bank has done, and it's one of its flagship reports released in 2020, estimating that more than 3 billion tons of minerals and metals will be needed by 2050 to achieve a less than 2 degree scenario, equivalent to 300,000 Eiffel Towers. Demand is going to increase across the board. Generally, here you can see some of the largest increases that are based on current production levels forecasted for 2050. The first group near the top, graphite, lithium, cobalt, indium, vanadium, massive percent increases in these specialized minerals, starting from a small base though, right? So a volume increase is perhaps not the same as you're seeing here in percentage increases. But where we'll see a lot of volume is in some of the base metals, which are necessary for the transition. Nickel, aluminum, copper, small percentage increases, but really significant in terms of amounts. And if I can just put a statistic out there that I had heard from Robert Friedland of Ivanhoe Group, confirmed it myself doing some independent research, but essentially, you know, since we've started mining copper, we mined, it was like in the last 10,000 years, we've mined about 700 million tons of copper in total. Now, in the next 25 years, if we just want to maintain, you know, like 3% GDP growth, we have to mine that same amount. That's not even considering the energy transition. If you add that on top, and depending on the scenarios, we have to mine 1.5 times to 2 times the amount of copper that we've mined in the last 10,000 years. So there's a huge opportunity here, but also a huge challenge, I think, to be able to do this responsibly. Oh, it was missing this slide. So some of I think we all know that there's very long lead times associated with bringing new deposits online. And unfortunately, what that means is that we're seeing rapidly rising prices for a number of energy minerals. Here are some price charts for lithium, which increased just 4 times in 2021. Copper is at a high as well. Nickel is at a 10-year high at the moment. And we're seeing similar trends for rare earths, cobalt. Obviously, this is going to boost mining and production and profitability, and I think we're seeing that with some of the annual results that are coming out. But also, what it does, I mean, there's an expression, right, that the cure for high prices is high prices, and what it's going to do, though, is make some of the transition perhaps less affordable as well, because these costs get passed on into the renewable energy technologies. We look at supply structure. I think what we find here is that it's quite concentrated at various parts of the value chain. The mining sites essentially are determined by geological availability, and then also importantly, where investment flows. But if you look at the charts here on the right, these are showing just the top 3 producers of where energy metals are produced and where energy metals are processed. Only just the top 3. Quite quickly, more than 50% of the world, copper, nickel, cobalt, rare earths, and lithium are concentrated at some point in the value chain in just 3 countries. Processing, though, I think it's worth making the distinction that it's heavily concentrated in China. And as a result, I think what we're seeing emerging is strategies by various governments or groups of governments to establish more resilient supply chains. That's, I think, a term that's being used. Looking to onshore a little bit more, looking to find like-minded countries where supply can be less unstable, for example, and really try and diversify this. I think if you look at this energy transition and the concentration of supply, it's much more concentrated than the fossil fuel sort of economy, where coal, oil, et cetera, is quite widespread around the world. I think it's only a matter of time, though, until the supply sources will become diversified. But at the moment, it's quite concentrated. So, in terms of developing new and resilient supply chains, what can be done? I think first we need to understand demand growth for critical minerals better. We're in this environment where the future of technology is quite pluralistic. There's a lot of substitution happening as a result of a lot of innovation. And an example would be the announcement, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday of this week, of Tesla switching battery technologies from sort of nickel dependent to iron ore dependent. I mean, they'll take a hit on the efficiency, but the cost will come down significantly. Other actions really is to grow and accelerate supply. That's either looking for new supply from the World Bank's perspective. We fund a lot of geo-data campaigns in developing countries. Inventorying tailings resources, another source, which speaks a bit to the circular economy and could be some of the most perhaps shovel-ready resources. Regulatory efficiency, I think, is a big one. I'm seeing that already in North America, where governments are looking at what can they do to sort of allow mines to come online as fast as possible. But really importantly, I think nobody wants to compromise the responsible development of these new mining projects. One that perhaps doesn't get enough attention, but I've seen used, is this providing price stability for these volatile markets. As I mentioned before, that the substitution can be quite sudden in choices between companies and their technologies, and so prices can be quite volatile. And so some kind of stability in the price to allow the financing to flow can be important. I'm not going to drain this slide, but I think one of the most important things as well is the human capital around the value chain. When you think about that amount of copper that needs to be mined in the next 25 years, 2.5 times what we've mined in the past, where are the people going to come from to build and operate these mines in a responsible way? And it's not just the STEM, I highlighted that, it's also the social specialists, the environmental specialists, et cetera, that I think are really important in making sure that it's these mines come online in a sustainable, responsible manner. So I think it's quite clear the world needs more minerals, but the question is, I think for all of us, where is it going to come from? How is it going to be green and clean? And what about communities and human rights? Now, I want to talk to you again about this region that I introduced at the beginning around Africa, the Middle East, Central and South Asia. It's a very rapidly growing region. Together with urbanization, this doesn't just create demand for energy transition minerals, but there's going to be demand for all kinds of minerals, including industrial minerals that are so important as part of the construction. It has really high potential for mineral production growth, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's very largely unexplored. But however, it's facing some common challenges around talent, around exploration, infrastructure, and capital. Now, I don't want you to look really at the detail here, but this slide is showing you that the region is industrializing. You can look at the data. It's projected to catch up in terms of manufacturing capacity with the Western world. And partly this is to meet local demand linked to the urbanization that I described, but partly it's to meet international demand. Now, in terms of possibilities, it's a region, again, with tremendous possibilities. It's comprised of 79 countries with over 3.5 billion, representing 45% of the global population. It has 33% of the global landmass. It has over 9 trillion US of GDP. And importantly, it has a huge opportunity to accelerate development and be a supplier of minerals, refined products as well, and manufactured products to global markets. In terms of its geological potential, it's already known that this region holds some of the largest reserves and resources for key commodities. If you look at the top, it's already the majority of known resources and reserves of platinum, phosphate, bauxite, manganese, cobalt, and diamonds, and remains also a key and important producer of palladium, uranium, gold, copper, and nickel, and all of those fit into these key industrial end users, which are all projected to be growing in the future. Now, one other thing though, when you look at sort of where investment and exploration is going, much of the region remains largely unexplored or underexplored. The geological mapping is often dated in some countries, so it's been done using older technologies. It can be low resolution, so you won't get those high density scale maps, or it's simply unavailable because the government lacks the systems to put the data available online, and you're just dealing with paper-based maps in a geological survey department. But I think important to note is that although this region contains about 1/3 of the global landmass, it attracts less than 10% of global exploration. You'll see there on the right some of the major destinations of exploration investment. That's per square kilometer. Chile, Australia, Canada, USA. If you look in terms of total absolute dollars, Canada was #1 in 2021. Australia followed. USA was #3. Chile came #5. But South Africa, for example, attracted only 0.76% of total exploration dollars. The DRC, which is the region that attracted the most exploration dollars in Africa, got 1.2%. Saudi Arabia got 0.75%. Funds that flow in the region, it's either from a few national champions or from foreign multinationals. But the region needs more investment by international mining companies and by local companies. I think in some places there can be considerable wealth, particularly in the Middle East, and it'll be really important, I think, for them to mobilize that domestic, local investment into their sector. I mean, Canada has been extremely successful at doing that. I mentioned to you that they were the #1 in terms of exploration dollars in 2021. 68% of that came from the flow-through share scheme, and meaning that 68% of that investment came from Canadians investing in their own mining sector. If you just took that 68, it actually ranks ahead of all the expenditure that went into the United States. So this can play a really big, important role at attracting mineral investment. But in terms of, when we look at things across the world, what are the main determinants of where investments flow? Generally, it's governments. It's governments, and governance is really the single largest determinant. Geological potential is really important. Either you have the geology or you don't. But again, a government has to make a decision to understand its geology, and then it has to make another decision to share that with the world to allow the private investment to flow. The potential profitability of operations is a big factor, and the fiscal regimes are a key part of that. Security of tenure is really important. Consistency or stability of policy, whether it be the mining law or code, the fiscal regime, again, are really important. I think sometimes it's worse to have a bad fiscal regime than one that's changing all the time. Investors want to know, with some level of predictability, what they're going to get. And the last one is the availability of infrastructure. Now, this differs obviously across that broad region, Saudi Arabia being quite good for infrastructure, but there's parts of Central Africa where the infrastructure is really lacking. But I think this issue of governance is not just important to catalyzing the mineral investment to get this pipeline going, but it's really important to the sustainable development of the sector. It's really important in ensuring that governments and communities are getting a fair share, that the environment isn't put at risk. And this can also link into political stability. If you have a well-managed mining sector, typically you're often also in a politically more stable region. In terms of some of these, if you want to look at these mining sector enablers, many of these are limited. We talked about investment and how most of the foreign investment or most of the global investment in exploration isn't going. There's very few regional champions, and that's something that needs to be worked on, as well as the domestic investor. I think that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as well as just the GCC, the kind of collaboration of Gulf states, they have a lot of wealth. They understand this, but they need to mobilize it. And I believe that there's a desire to perhaps create a future mining finance hub there. Infrastructure, as I mentioned, is lacking. There's much lower road and rail density. That adds to costs. It adds to inefficiencies, right? It'll add to your carbon footprint, for example, as well. Financing, just lower levels of capital. Again, you can't generalize with such a broad region, but for much of Africa, certainly that's true of parts of Africa. And talent, again, is going to be a big constraint, I think, onto, on being able to develop the sector. So we need to think about that. There's a lot of brain drain, which is working against investment, the local investment in human capital. I think we need to think through how we can support those countries. Coming back a bit to the question of governance. And what I wanted to really say here is that I'm sure a lot of the listeners or participants recognize this, but the world is changing, not just in terms of the energy transition, but the way that we're doing business, the importance of ESG is all changing very quickly. And with that comes massive economic, financial, commercial risks, but also tremendous opportunities. Communities are facing increased pressure, partly in result of climate change. There's going to be important, renewed focus on water and how that's shared, and water is a very important input into mining processes. But I think, an important thing to think about, which affects governments, these mining host governments, but as well as mining companies, is that we're in this environment where if it's not a producer, or sorry, a sort of an end user company like Tesla or Apple that know that their consumers want a clean product and will therefore identify a supplier of choice, and then everyone else becomes a supplier of last resort, and you may not get access to markets, you may get a price discount as opposed to a premium. There is serious and emerging discussions around these border adjustment tariffs on carbon. And so if you're operating in an environment and you have a high carbon footprint, and you're not already subject to some kind of carbon taxation, that product is going to get taxed in a consumer country. It poses risks for governments because it's essentially a transfer of mineral wealth to those consumer nations if they aren't capturing it themselves, so a carbon tax. But it will ultimately translate into a price discount as it comes back rippling through the value chain. So there's a real interest, I think, and an important, government objective and business reason to ensure that the entire mineral value chain works toward reducing emissions, but also ensuring this responsible and resilient mineral supply chain. To help governments think through this, the World Bank has come up with sort of a framework to think about these issues. We call it the Climate Smart Mining Framework, which its definition is a sustainable extraction, processing, and recycling of minerals and metals to deliver social, economic, and environmental benefits throughout the value chain. We've broken it up into these 4 pillars: climate mitigation actions. I'm not going to read every building block, but climate mitigation, climate resilience, circular economy, and creating market opportunities. And sort of running all across that is the governance and adequacy of the regulatory framework, but also gender and innovation. But on that, the governance and regulatory framework, we have another tool that we use to help countries. We've rolled this out in 18 countries so far. It's called the Mining Sector Diagnostic Tool. What you're seeing here is a dashboard for Peru that was just completed late last year. And what we try and do is systematically think across the extractive industry's value chain and assess how well does a country do against what would be considered international good practice. But we cut it up between 2 lenses. The first is, you'll see the row, de jure performance, which means what's the quality of your written laws, policy, regulation. And so we look at that again across this what we call the extractive industries value chain. And then we look at de facto performance. So given what you've said you want to achieve in your rules and regulations, how are you doing against that? And it's not uncommon to see a little bit of a gap, that people are doing stronger on paper than they are in practice. Peru shows that a little bit. But the reason I wanted to say this is that we're using these 2 frameworks. We're actually building out a module that'll incorporate this climate smart mining into this framework. We don't know exactly how it's going to look yet at the end, but to really operationalize this, really make sure that we can engage with governments and remove barriers for companies that want to have a decarbonized operation, but also it's to manage some of the mitigation risks, or the adaptation risks around climate change, around mining communities, etc. This is just a slide that shows you some of the resources that are available. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I just wanted to thank you again for letting me share this with you. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Martin. That was quite in-depth and quite interesting. I have a few queries, and after which I can head to the audience questions. Martin, you talked about accelerating mining development across the world to meet the supply demand. At the same time, analysts in the last year have predicted that GHG emissions from mining companies is set to increase in the coming years. So, for instance, the BMO released a report last month which states that emissions from lithium mining companies, for instance, will increase in the next decade due to the high demand, and also because companies are exploring more spodumene-based mines as opposed to brine. So keeping in mind the world's decarbonization goals, how crucial do you think will it be to keep emissions in the mining sector in check in the coming years?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much for that. I think you're right. I mean, energy intensity of production is going to go up, okay? It's natural. We're always mining the best, generally we're mining the best quality deposits first. It doesn't necessarily mean that carbon intensity needs to go up. I mean, the 2 don't need to be connected. So we know that energy intensity will go up for lithium as they switch and develop new types of resources. It's just going to be the exact same thing for copper. So it's important, I think, for mining companies to realize that their scope 1 and 2 emissions are somebody else's scope 3 emissions. And consumers want clean products. I mean, some, not all, we're not there yet, but the consumer of a Tesla, if you're buying a renewable energy vehicle, for example, or EV rather, you'd like to know that you're buying this and that its carbon footprint has been managed or minimized. So those companies are already actively engaging with suppliers of raw minerals and getting into all kinds of contracts that they wouldn't normally have done before, to try and make sure that they can kind of put this value proposition forward to their end consumer. So there's a risk or an opportunity. You can be a supplier of choice, or you could be a supplier of last resort. So I think there's a natural business case there, I think, for companies. But again, as I mentioned before, there's also an incentive there to avoid paying carbon taxes or perhaps reduction in price due to these border adjustment tariffs, which are coming. So yeah, again, I think from my perspective, this is very important, an issue of decarbonizing, but not just lithium, but I think all the minerals, for not only for us to succeed in tackling climate change. The mining sector has its own emissions footprint too, and it's not that, you know, every sector has to do its part, but I think it also makes really good business sense. It's going to make increasing business sense going forward.
And you also talk about the rising prices and other crucial minerals in your presentation, and about how there's a huge supply gap. So in the last UN's COP summit last year, several countries talked about becoming climate neutral by 2050, which obviously needs a huge abundance of metals. How realistic or achievable do you think this goal is, considering the supply deficit?
Well, like I mentioned, I think like the cure to high prices is high prices. And unfortunately, I mean, there's two impacts of that to my side, and being an economist is the demand side of it, which is that it does trigger innovation into substitution of what some of the more rare minerals will be, okay? Again, Tesla announced that it's going to substitute away from nickel into iron in its battery cells. But what it does, though, too, as well, is the knock-on effect of higher prices is going to reduce the affordability. It'll make the energy transition more expensive. On the supply side, of course, mining companies respond to prices, and so we can expect that there will be more investment, there will be more development. I'm not concerned at all about geological availability. I think there's enough resources. The question for me becomes mainly around, can we produce them at a sufficient quantity and in time? And I'm not sure how all that's going to play out, but we need to find the resources. And that's something for governments, the World Bank, and the private sector to work on together. We'll lay in place, or help governments lay in place, a basic level of geological information which the private sector can then respond to, and then the investment flows from the private sector. But then, the second question is, can we get all the mines built in time, knowing some of the lead times to production? And then, again, this human capital constraint, where is the kind of future mining workforce going to come from? And I know that on my side, as we start developing new projects and helping countries, I do want to target high school level STEM kind of courses, university levels, just to try and improve the quality of graduates that come out to feed this industry. But also, you never know where those people are going to work in the economy, so it also helps with local development. Maybe there's a role there for the private sector as well, in terms of bursaries and grants, and just to make sure that people have access to those education opportunities.
Right. Thank you for that, Martin. On a slightly different note, considering the ongoing geopolitical situations involving Russia, Ukraine, China, and the US perhaps as well, how do you think this might play out in the world of mining? Do you see any potential impacts in the future?
Yeah, I think we're all very saddened of what's happened in Russia and Ukraine, and I'm not going to comment on that. But I do feel like, what I mentioned in one of the slides before, the concentration of market power for these energy and minerals is much more than it has been with the fossil fuel economy. I see a lot of countries looking to mitigate those risks, actually groups of countries. You have North America, the US, Canada, in advanced discussions of what we can do. I mean, Canada's looking at its regulatory system, trying to figure out elements of regulatory efficiency. A lot of the provincial kind of geological surveys are already trying to take an inventory of what potential future minerals might be, or future energy minerals might be there. So there's a lot more interest, I think, in onshoring some of the value chain. There's also recognition that you need all of the value chain, because there's no point in producing it and then refining it somewhere and being concentrated. You'll still be susceptible to the same kind of supply disruptions. So there is work happening in that space. I do feel like the geopolitics will become increasingly more important. So no doubt, as we all seek for the same kind of limited resource base, it becomes much more important to countries. But I do believe that over time, the sources will start to diversify. I think, and so we will have a more diversified and less concentrated value chain.
Right. On that note, since you mentioned Saudi Arabia and you've been there and the region, do you think these relatively unexplored areas can play a crucial role in terms of meeting the supply? Do you, for instance, foresee more international Western companies heading to countries like Saudi Arabia or other unexplored areas in the future?
I mean, absolutely, yes. I think Saudi Arabia can play a really big role in this. They have a Vision 2030. Part of it is to diversify its economy away from fossil fuels, and the mining sector has been identified as that. But it's bigger than mining. They really want to position themselves as a kind of renewable energy technology innovation and development and manufacturing kind of hub. There's a big company called EV Metals that has made a $2 billion investment recently that will basically process lithium that's mined in Australia, in Saudi Arabia. The idea will then be to, I think, build out battery packs. Lucid Motors has made an announcement that they're making an investment there in their EV manufacturing and development. And I think as they look back, we just talked a bit about the geopolitics of critical energy minerals. They're looking first at their own ability to supply the minerals necessary for this future industry. But then the Future Minerals Forum, this grouping of countries, is essentially looking for like-minded partners that can integrate and cooperate and trade and in that space. So it's quite a bold vision. Let me talk to you a little bit though, just about Saudi Arabia itself. So they have some very interesting geology. There's been a lot of work that's been done. It's not, I think, yet at the level of detail that everybody would ideally want, but it is available online. They have an online portal where you can access the geodata. The geology is quite interesting because the country kind of runs northwest to southeast, and sort of that eastern side is preliminary or predominantly sedimentary. It's where you find all the oil and gas resources. But on the western side, what you find is the Arabic Shield, right? And it's prospective for a tremendous variety of minerals. And again, it hasn't been very well explored. But let me say this though, it's not a new mining jurisdiction. Al Ma'aden has been operating there for a long time. Al Ma'aden is the state-owned enterprise, kind of similar to their oil side with Saudi Aramco. And they've over time built up tremendous internal technical competence, okay? But it's their national champion and it can't do it all. It's happy to partner with foreign companies, and it's already partnered with, I believe, Barrick on the development of a mine. Ivanhoe is exploring there quite aggressively as well. And they presented at the Future Minerals Forum and quite bullish about it. But I think aside from that, I mean, if you think about this grand vision that they have and what are some of the key elements that would be necessary to make it work, and to my mind, they have a lot of the competitive kind of prerequisites. First, they put in a new mining code and new regulations, and it's the World Bank helped them to do that. And so it does meet international kind of best practices. There's a few tweaks happening to the regs, I think, to improve clarity for investors. We continue to work with them on that. But then in terms of the other enablers, the cost of energy is very low in Saudi Arabia because of its abundant resources. And there's a plan to make 50% of it green by 2030. So they're putting a lot of money into making, having sort of a green grid. Just to give you an example, already, I mean, all of its water, all of Saudi Arabia's water, most of it is all through desalination plants, and already 50% of that has been is runoffs for renewable energy. In terms of other infrastructure, like transport infrastructure, it's quite good. They've got a good road network, which is well maintained. They have rail, they have port. And speaking then about the ports, geographical positioning of Saudi Arabia is really quite ideal. I mean, you've got access to European markets, you've got access to Asian markets, you've got access to Africa, and you're next to arguably the best shipping channel in the world. And that infrastructure and that excellent geographical location works both ways. It works not just for exports, but it works for imports. So I do believe that they've got this vision around this renewable energy complex. They're looking for partners. And yeah, I think they can play a significant role. I was very impressed when I was there.
Well, that's good to hear.
But thinking then about this, I guess the second part about the question, which is a little bit about new regions and more risk. There's a couple of things I've been noticing. We've been engaging with, as you mentioned in the introduction, I cover a large portfolio of African countries, and I do engage with the private sector. And from what I've seen generally, and it may just be because of price, but it also might be some of the what's been happening in Latin America and some of the political changes there, that Africa is becoming sort of relatively more attractive. And companies are looking to take on a little bit more risk. Ivanhoe's opened up a big copper mine in the DRC. BHP has been reported to be in talks with them at developing a new area, sort of brownfield site just to the north of that. And there's other companies that I've been discussing with that are looking at taking on more risk. What I do find though, and maybe it explains some of what I would call a home bias of exploration companies, is that maybe a lot of companies don't know how to manage some of these political risks. That's why I focused a little bit about the beginning of the role of the World Bank and trying to catalyze that investment and the kind of guarantees and relationships that the companies could leverage, is really to first think about that. On our side of the World Bank, like what we did with Saudi Arabia, we work with governments and helping them put in place good quality mining codes or mining laws and regulations that can attract investment. But also we make some of those investments in geodata. So I think we all have to be a little bit better, I think, at thinking about risk and managing it and doing our own part. But I do feel like some of those higher risk areas are going to be equally important in supplying the minerals for this transition.
Thank you, Martin. I'll move on to some queries from the audience. I'll just read them out. Raziel Zesman asks, could you please comment on the synergies and interdependence between advancing modern sustainable mining and modern sustainable agriculture? Both are crucial for development. However, for example, in many jurisdictions, the agriculture sector opposes mining projects, at times due to water issues.
Yeah, I know, you're right. There can be conflict. I mean, we see that also in artisanal and small scale mining between pastoralists and the miners themselves. There can certainly be conflict. I think the way that I would see some of these synergies, and linking it a little bit to the energy transition, but then also perhaps the responsible mine closure, is that nature-based offsets are a really huge part of companies being able to achieve carbon neutrality. And so if companies can help support communities in agriculture and develop offsets at the same time, and also, get community support for their projects and the social license to operate, it feels like a bit of a win-win. On the closure side of things, there's been some work that's being done a few years ago by a number of large mining companies looking at the success of receiving relinquishment certificates from governments after they've finished an operation. What we find is that a lot of sites go from like active closure to monitoring to maybe like passive closure, back into active monitoring and active closure activities. And you have a lot of sites staying here and they don't get a relinquishment certificate for 20, 50 years. And I don't know if there's an increasing reluctance from governments to issue closure certificates, and they just really aren't sure if the site has been reestablished. But that's causing some thinking around, what the new closure model looks like. And because if you're going to keep maintaining and monitoring this site, then maybe it should generate some income, and agriculture could potentially be an income generator for that too. So and it could give something back sustainable to the community in terms of employment. That's just a couple examples. There's obviously many, many more, I think, but I do believe that there are synergies between the two.
There are a couple of questions related to ESG. So how do we ensure that human rights are protected in the mining sector going forward? And how do we ensure that these emissions regulations work out and don't impact the ozone layer going forward?
I mean, there's many aspects to human rights. Let me try and give you an example around the DRC in a model that I've been seeing that's kind of being discussed, because I don't know if people know this already, but like 60%, just over 60% of the world's cobalt comes from the DRC, and about 20% of that 60 is mined artisanally. And at those mining sites, there's often women, which isn't a problem, but often children. And that's where a human rights issue comes in terms of this responsible supply chain. And people are looking at different, it's not an easy one to solve. There's no daycares, if a mother needs to go to work with her husband at the mining site, there's no, daycare facilities, for example, that she could put a child in. So they accompany them. But what we try and look at is, maybe there's kind of incentive schemes and subsidies that we could give to have the child in school, get a free meal in school. It's not an easy thing to resolve at all. Trafigura, for example, has got a pilot project working with the government of the DRC and together with PACT, which is a well-known artisanal and small-scale mining kind of consultancy, but also nonprofit, putting together a model to try and pass down to the artisanal miners kind of globally competitive market prices for their cobalt. It's an innovative model. They'll be making sure that the community development happens at the same time, that there is no child labor. I feel like we need more of those innovative models because I don't think there's a very simple answer. In terms of the emissions regulations, I mean, we have to, as an economist, I feel like the best mechanism is through carbon pricing, right? I do understand that sometimes there's an investment hurdle, and so that should perhaps be complemented by subsidies on particular technologies. I know Canada's quite good at that. I think there's a mine up north, a diamond mine that received a grant from the Canadian government to install some renewable energy. So that does help move them along a little bit. But I think it's this combination of carbon pricing and subsidies. And I don't necessarily think that or believe that the introduction of a carbon price should simply mean more money for government coffers. Some kind of tax neutrality around that, I think, would be welcome, particularly by industries, so you don't make them uncompetitive. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Martin.
We are, Namil, Martin, amazing conversation. I just want to let you know, we only have 2 minutes left. So perhaps, Nemo, we take one last question.
Yeah, sure.
I think one in particular you want to choose?
Let's go with Mariam Jafari's. Can you comment on the infrastructure required for battery recycling going forward?
It's not something I've looked at. I focus more on the upstream side of things, but I mean, I guess I would ask myself, would it be different than what we have? Would it be substantively different than what we have for existing battery recycling? I mean, like, I think over 70% of lead is recycled from old car batteries. The issue for me is that we don't have enough EVs on the road yet, right? And so we're not seeing a lot of recycling yet because the batteries aren't necessarily at end of life. That'll slowly build up over time. But I do think as well, there is a role here for the manufacturers to make sure that these technologies can be easily recycled, because one of the big burdens that kills the economics of recycling is you have all these tiny amounts of metal in quite a complex product, and separating it can be very, very difficult and costly. So I guess, good upfront design. I think we have to wait for some of the stocks to build up as well, but I do feel like the investments will flow. There's a lot of people looking at it. Yeah.
Great. Martin, Nemo, we're going to have to leave it there I apologize to our audience. I knew this was going to be a presentation that got people thinking. We had a slew of more questions, but we're committed to our other speakers and to Martin's time that we have to end it here on time. Martin, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us all the way from Senegal. Nemo, wonderful job. And yes, lots to chew on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Anthony.
All the best.
Enjoy the rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right.